What's up guys, my name is Matt. Today I'm gonna show you how to optimize your PTZ optics cameras for a church live stream. When Jake was here a few months back, he was really happy about how I got our PTZ optics cameras to look on our live stream. And so he wanted me to show you guys a little bit of how I made that happen, what all the settings I use and so forth. Today I've got 5 tips for you on things that you can do to optimize your live stream. Some of these will work no matter what camera you're using. Some of them will work mostly with PTZ cameras, and some of it's very specific to the PTZ optics cameras. So, tip number 1, lighting. If you haven't already watched Jake's video that he did on YouTube about lighting on the Churchfront channel, by all means start there. Or better yet, go to worshipministryschool.com and subscribe to their program. If you don't know a lot about lighting, it's a daunting thing to get into as a worship minister or a tech guy for the first time. So start there, start with some really good training. With your lighting, what you wanna do is you wanna get first your key lighting really, really good. So that's the lighting that faces your people, that shines on their face. If you don't have good key lighting, your camera shots will look horrible. Second, you want good hair lighting. You wanna light up the back of your subject really, really well. If you don't have that, your subjects are gonna look flat and two-dimensional. And finally, if you have some cool stage design stuff set up like I've got with the wood panels and lights back there, get some light on that so it adds further dimension to your shots. Without good lighting, if you don't have good lighting, honestly, stop the video, because none of the rest of the things I'm gonna go in today make any difference if you don't light your stage well. So start there. Update your firmware before you do any of this stuff. If you do all of these changes and you update your firmware after the fact, there's a really good chance you're gonna wipe your camera's settings clean. Even if you use the PTZ optics option to back up your camera and then re-import those settings, I've found that the color settings that I'm about to tell you about do not save and do not come back into the camera when you reload those settings. So do the firmware updates first if you haven't updated your cameras in a while. If they're working fine, you don't need those updates, don't worry about it. But what I'm warning you against is don't update your firmware right after you do all of this, or you're just gonna have to do it all over again. All right, for tip number 2, we're gonna dive into the settings of the cameras a little bit, and tip number 2 is go manual. These cameras are set up that you can plug them in, and out of the box, they're going to show things. They're not gonna show things well, but they're gonna show things to you via the lenses that they're using. They're set up so that in bright environments and in dark environments, you're gonna see something. When you do it that way, the image just never looks good. So we're gonna go to manual settings on pretty much everything on these cameras. So let's dive into the menus real quick and we'll see what it looks like. All right, first thing is this PTZ optics software. A lot of you guys, if you have these cameras, you've probably used this software. They have it for Mac and PC. First thing that you wanna do if you're gonna dig into these settings, you need to open up the advanced menu. This doesn't give the advanced menu. So you want to go in here and you want to actually click on view, and then you want to click on advanced view. That's going to open up this wider menu for you to access more of the features. Now here's the tricky part. The other thing you're going to need to do is go into the manual settings for these cameras via a web browser by logging into them through your network. So if you don't have your PTZ optics cameras set up on a network where you can log into them, you're going to want to do that. So I'm going to open up a web browser and I'm going to go to the web address. If you don't know what it is, go into the manual for your cameras. We've actually readdressed ours. When you log into them for the first time, you're going to need a username and password. By default, the username and password is admin for both. So admin, sign in. Once you open a web interface, you're gonna see pretty much everything that you can get to from the menu, but this is important and I'll show you in a little bit why. So we're gonna go through the settings one by one and show you what the settings that I use and how I got to those settings and maybe what you'll need to do in order to make your cameras look good. So if you've got these pulled up, you'll notice this is my camera 1 here, and this is the PT Optics software. Through that, once you have your camera selected, you click on this PTZ menu. It is going to bring up a PTZ menu. We're gonna go through these line by line. The first one is exposure. If I click on enter, it's going to open my exposure menu. You will probably have it set to some sort of non-manual mode, some kind of an automatic exposure mode. Take it off that. Go to manual. I run these in f1.8, which is the widest open that you can run these cameras aperture. The aperture, if you don't know what that is, it's just basically it's the window through which your camera sees. And the lower the number, the lower the f-stop, the bigger that window is, the more light you let in. So you want to let in as much light as possible to these cameras because they don't do great in low light. So I've got it all the way down to the lowest setting it will go. As far as setting up your stream, you're gonna have to check the manual on how to do this, because there is a turn switch on the back of these PTZ optics cameras that actually designates what resolution and frame rate you're running in. So I run in 1080p 30 frames per second. I'm not telling you that's what you should run in. That's what I found worked best with all the rest of my equipment. So 1080p 30 is what I run in, but you actually have to manually change a dial on the back of those cameras to make that work. So because I'm running in 1080p 30, following the 180-degree shutter rule, I'm running in 1/60 for my shutter. This gain comes standard bumped way up. You want as little gain in a camera as possible because it's just introducing noise if you can get away from it. So I pushed my gain all the way down to 0. If you cannot get enough light on your stage that you have to run the gain, run it as low as you possibly can. And by running your iris lower and running your shutter speed at 1/60, will work better. If you bump your frame rate up to 60 frames per second, that means your shutter speed has to bump up to 1/120 of a second, and that will let in less light, and therefore your image will be darker. So again, these are all the settings. You want to optimize the amount of light you're getting into your camera. So moving on, this DRC, honestly, I don't know what it does, but at 0 it looked better. So I moved that down to 0. Going on to the next menu, we're going to click back here, and we're going to go down to color. Once we're in the color menu, there are several white balance modes you can be in. There are a couple that you can use, and I think you can get a decent image out of. You can actually go through, and I'll flip through these real quick, but when they come, you're almost always in auto. You'll notice that the color changed when I did that because the white balance, it's trying to white balance off of an image where there's not a lot of white in it. If you leave it in auto, it probably will never look great. There is this indoor mode, again, it depends on your lights, but it probably is not going to look great. Outdoor mode, same thing, depends on your lights. There is a one push option that I did use for a while, and what this is you set it on this, and then you actually get a large white object on stage, and you can click I think enter on this, and it will actually set your white balance based on the large white object you have on stage, whether it's a piece of paper, a whiteboard, whatever. And I did use this a couple times, but I found that basically the best way to do it, and there's actually a manual option as well where you actually dial in red, green, blue, green, saturation, all that. Because I know a little bit about cameras, I want to be dealing in Kelvin, and I really like that this shows me my color temperature and what I'm at. Before I replaced my lights, I used the old incandescent bulbs. Some of you might still have those. You're going to run your color temperature down closer to 3,000, 3,500 Kelvin. For my lights now, I'm running LED Licos or spotlights, and therefore I'm running that closer to 5,000 Kelvin, or actually exactly at 5,000 Kelvin. These other settings here, this red-green tuning and blue-green tuning, I'm not going to tell you what any of this is going to work for you. This is where you have to figure out what your settings need to be for your lighting. So if you're using those incandescent bulbs, play around with this a little bit. What I suggest is if you can get your hands on a whiteboard, put a whiteboard on the stage and get the white to look white on a good monitor. And if you can do that, then you're going to end up with a decent shot. If you put a whiteboard on your stage and it looks too blue, you're going to need to move your color temperature higher. It's going to be closer to 5,000 or above. If you put that whiteboard on stage and it looks orange, you're going to need to drop that number down closer to 3,000. So whatever your settings are you need for lights, just dig into these until you get it to look good. The next menu option here is image. When you dig into this, you're going to see luminance, contrast, sharpness. Again, all of these are things I played around with. I'm not going to tell you that this is the best way to do it. My settings are 7 on luminance and contrast. I have it set to 7. Sharpness is at 3. And then I have the gamma set to default and the style to clarity. I played around with these until I found something I liked. That doesn't mean these should be the settings you use, but you might be able to start here and go from there. This PTZ menu, this is really all about how the camera itself operates. So pan speed, zoom speed. If you don't need to change any of that, I would actually tell you to kind of stay away from that menu. You don't need to mess with anything there. Going down here to this noise reduction, this goes back to what I started with the gain. If you do have to use more gain, the noise reduction on these cameras isn't terrible. So you can get rid of some of that noise. But again, I would highly recommend, I run it at 0. So if you can get your gain down to 0 and you can get your noise reduction off and the image looks good, I would highly recommend going with that. The next tip that I've got, this is one that I actually didn't find until playing around with these for quite some time, but it's actually in this setup menu here. If you go into the setup menu, you're gonna actually see lens type. And you've got 2 types. You've got lens type 1 and lens type 2, and by default, my cameras all kept going to lens type 2, and for some reason, I did not like the look of that lens as much as I like type 1. So I switched it to type 1, and I liked it better. Again, I'm not saying that's gonna work for you, but play around with it to see what you like. So now the final tip, and this is important. Once you get all these settings looking good, you can't just save your settings using your PTZ Optics software. PTZ Optics, if someone from your company has watched this far into the video, by all means, if there's a different way to do this, let us know. But what I've found is the only way to save all of those color settings to each and every single one of your presets is to do it from the web interface menu here. If you do it from here, it does not save the colors and you end up having to go back in and change it all. When you go into these, and I'm gonna go up to the color menu here, because color seems to be the one that needs the most messing with. When you save, this exposure seems to save. If you click on this store exposure settings with PTZ request, the exposure settings all change, but the color does not. So what you wanna do is you wanna go in here and you wanna recall a preset. For me, I'm gonna start with 0. I think I'm already at 0, so let's recall 1. So now I moved the camera to preset 1. I've got all the same colors. It looks like the color went with it. So it looks like I should be able to go in here and type 1 and hit set and save that preset, but it won't. What you actually have to do is go into this menu and change every single one of these settings down and then back up, or up and then back down. So I would go to color temperature and I would actually change it down and back up. Red green tuning down and back up. Blue green tuning down and back up. Because when I click save to the preset, if I haven't changed that setting in colors, it will not save to that preset. And you want to save your colors to each and every preset. Otherwise, all this work you've done is going to only work on one of your presets. So once you've done that and you've changed all these settings that you need to change, you go in here and you type in the preset again and you click set, and you're going to see this little thing pop up that says data update successful. Once you've done that, those color settings will be saved to that preset. I run about well, I can see right here, I run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 presets on a normal Sunday for each camera. So I had to do this 7 times for each camera, so a total of 21 times, because I've got 3 of them, in order to save those color settings to all 3 cameras. But if you don't do that, it will not save those color settings. So that's it. That's how to get your cameras, your PTZ Optics cameras, to look as good as possible on your church live stream. Thanks for checking out the video. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the Worship Ministry Toolkit below.